Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Kat Ternes. Kat, thank you for being here today.
More than glad to be here. Very honored to be a guest.
It is my honor to have you on. First of all, because as you know, I'm a big fan of yours and all the work that you have done and are continuing to do. But more important, or equally as important, I should say, as you know, I am the child of who I like to refer to as the most powerful woman in the insurance industry. Many people don't know that. A lot of people probably think that, there's probably some CEO out there that they think is the most powerful woman in the insurance industry.
No.
But I believe that my mother is a trailblazer in the industry. And many people say that the industry is pale, stale, and male. But I believe that it was pale, stale, and male. And speaking to someone like you, who is a CEO powerhouse of the insurance industry, when you talk, everyone listens. So it's an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you, friend. Your mother, our relationship is one that I'm very grateful for, but the icon and like the emblem that your mother is, that she has been, am I allowed to say a badass? Is that
You can say it.
Podcast allowable? That she's been that so graciously and so honestly and like authentically through her whole career. She is a legend. So every so often I end up one way or another, like backed into a corner on a decision. And like growing up Catholic, I had the little, like, what would Jesus do bracelets. And now I'm like, what would Goldie do? It's like my new little mantra.
I think, what will I do that Goldie will be not upset about?
That's true too. Yeah.
Term.
Like, what can I do that's not going to make her more mad at me? Yes.
Right. Well, I'm her son. So I'm her son. And I'm also the father of 5 of her grandchildren. So like, whatever, I got a leg up.
And all girls, right?
No, I have one son. Hey.
Okay. All right.
My number, the cream in the Oreo, the peanut butter and jelly in the sandwich is my son.
One boy.
So one boy. And you know what? It's funny. You there's a little tangent, but that's okay. I think that he's content being the only boy. I actually have a theory that my wife and I go back and forth on. That is, so he's 7 and my youngest is about 9 months old. Now she's 10 months old. So everyone was like, oh, he probably wants a brother. There's another one in between them. But like, oh, when, we had 3 girls and this one boy. And when you think about it, it was like, okay, he probably wanted a brother. But at a certain point, when you would be 6 years older than your brother.
Yeah, it's not as fun anymore.
You're not going to throw the football around with him. By the time he's ready to throw around the football, you're going to want to go right here to with your friends.
Right.
So I actually think from a strategic perspective, being the only boy at that point, meaning the one above him is not a boy and the one below him is not a boy. Right. Therefore, I think from a strategic perspective, the card of I am the only boy is a valuable card, I think, for him.
That's my husband. I mean, you've got to talk to Ian numerous times. He has 3 sisters, 2 older, 1 younger. And I think if you'd asked him, like, same thing, at a young age growing up, do you want a brother? He would have been like, oh my God, I want a brother. And now through like he and I meeting in college and even, being married now the last 4 years, like I don't think if you asked Ian, probably from 10 or so on, if he had like really wanted a brother, or now if he would go back and necessarily like change it for his 10-year-old self. No, like he loves being his mom's only son. He loves being his grandma's only grandson. And like I am generously and happily the recipient of that. Also, I'm the only daughter-in-law. So yeah, I think at some point it becomes like a good card to play that you're like the only boy.
God, I love you. Just for the listeners, what college did you meet at?
Ohio State.
The
Ohio State University.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, in one of the little towers right outside of the stadium. So in case you weren't thoroughly indoctrinated when you stepped foot on campus, you got to watch every football game. Right from
the Ohio State University. Yeah. Okay. So we've accomplished everything we need to, and this is just kidding. So that's it. So take us back. So obviously now you're the CEO of Indium, powerhouse company in the insurance industry. For those who don't know, for those who are not in the industry, but what do we need to know about your early life that led you to be the CEO of a company at such a young age? I mean, that's incredible.
Thank you. Something like from me being little, or like
Tell us about your upbringing.
having.
Tell us like what inspired your hustle from being really young.
So I grew up on a farm, which I think was a very interesting experience. Like when I was little, when I think about like growing up to like, oh, you're kind of a young adult, I was a like dirty, rotten little farm kid. And I talk about that pretty like honestly with people like all the time. They're like, Kat, you have no filter or this or that. I'm like, what do you expect from me? Like I'm a barefoot, dirty, rotten farm kid from the Midwest. Like, what do you want?
Very similar to New York City, like very
Yeah,
similar. I
same
see
thing,
all the
same thing.
similarities. I
Like
see why we get
maybe
along
nice
here.
wear shoes, but like same
Yeah.
thing. It's just a gritty environment, and like there's a creativity to it. There's a resourcefulness to it. There's like a perseverance to it. There's a timeliness to like growing up on a farm. And then
Did you work on the farm? Not to interrupt you. Did you work on the
yeah,
farm?
yeah.
Actively.
Like
Okay.
I'm one of three
I
girls.
didn't
I'm
know
the
that.
oldest, so like there was no scenario that I wasn't gonna like help and like work and pitch in. My dad is the only boy in his generation. So, like, my grandpa is one of five boys. So, like, four great uncles. My dad is the only boy in the next generation down for like a significant amount of time. And then he has a baby compared to him, almost closer to my age, guy cousin. But otherwise, he was like the only boy even in his generation. So, he was helping what was our family farm and our uncles and all of that. And then he had his own. So, yeah, when I was little, like, I would like ride around in a truck and like in
I
tractors and
love
like
this.
do all kinds of like pick up rocks and like just terrible manual labor. And like very much like you were outside like sun up to sundown. You either entertained yourself or you were like working. Like,
But very formative, right? You said very manual labor, but like
yeah, yeah.
nobody does that anymore. Nobody.
No, no. And I don't think like that work day or that style too, like the concept, and I've heard other people say it too, but like if I told my parents I was bored, work would be found to do. Like you're not like, you got time to lean, you got time to clean. Like there's just always something to do. And my parents worked really, really hard to put me when I was little into Catholic school. So I went to like a very strict school even when I was little. But I was absolutely like the dirty kid there and like the poor kid there because we were like a farm family and everybody else was like living in town and like nice like Catholic families, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So one second. No, we got to stop there. So what is that like when you're the kid who's like literally like on a weekend, you're
Hmm.
working on the family farm, like actually working on the family
Oh, I
farm?
had no friends. It was like so sad. And I was like, I just had no friends because like I would get done with school and like everybody else's parents would be done working because their job wasn't sunrise to sunset. So they would get picked up from school by their parents like at 2 or 3 o'clock, like at the end of the school day, someone's mom came and picked them up from school. I rode home for like an hour and a half on the public school bus that was like required to service the parochial schools, and I rode home with high schoolers in my like little Catholic uniform. I just sat in the front seat by the bus driver and like rode home for like it took an hour and a half. Like it took so long. Same thing in the mornings. Like I always was getting up early because it took an hour and a half to get to school because I had to stand out front, wait to get on the high school bus, and they took me to the high school, and then they took me from the high school to the little parochial school. So like it was a whole thing. So it was just like very lonely because I didn't have a lot of friends. My mom was like very like nice and tried to have me be like in Girl Scouts and stuff, but I would miss a lot of the extra stuff because my parents had things to do on the weekend, and like same thing, like yeah, a normal job, you don't really work a lot on the weekend. A farm job, like what's the weekend, like when in season, like there is no weekend.
Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, like that was really it just like the same with sports. Like my parents, like there is no season of sports that doesn't conflict with farming. So even though they would have like really tried to have me do it, like I competed and I played and I did a lot of training and like as a figure skater, but that was the only sport I could do because it was like outside of farming seasons, like spring sports, fall sports, farming, like couldn't do it. So I just had no friends. It was sad and it was lonely, and kids were mean to me because they were rich and I was poor and I smelled. And I was badly behaved compared to other nice little girls. Like I was running around like a little hellion, like beating up boys. Like it just was it was just lonely.
We're not going to get that. We're gonna leave that part out. Just so
Like leave
I'm
that
not going to
alone.
get into
Don't
the
bully
details of that. We're
kids.
just going to leave that over on the sides. We do not condone bullying on this.
No.
You know what's incredible, Kat?
Mhm.
And I'm so happy that we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
You said earlier that my mom, she
Mhm.
should live me well, is a little bit your idol. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
what's amazing about this. My mother had a very similar experience.
Aw.
And I'm happy that I'm going to share this because I think it's special. And that is that my mother grew up the child of Holocaust survivors in Syracuse, New York. And at the time in Syracuse, and probably still today, there were no Jewish private schools. But
Mm.
yet, the survivors of the war, many of them grew up very religious, observant Orthodox Jews in Europe. So when they came, they put their kids in public school. They had no money.
Mhm.
My grandparents were working in a factory,
Mm.
and my mother was in the Syracuse public school. And what's interesting about that is that she and the rest of the community of children of survivors, my mother actually was born in Europe and in a displaced persons camp and came to America after that. But that generation of kids, they were real outcasts because the football games were on the Sabbath, the
Oh.
dances were on the Sabbath.
Mhm.
So she grew up
Aw.
that they went to the school, similar to what you're describing,
Yeah.
and her parents worked in a factory. So forget about money. Money wasn't a thing.
Right.
But
Right.
and the interesting thing about it is fast forward to my life.
Mhm.
When my mother met my father, he should rest in peace, they had a conversation. My father was not religious at all or affiliated at all with Judaism at the time. And she said, if we have kids, they're going to go to a Jewish private school in New York. It doesn't necessarily have to be an Orthodox religious school,
Mhm.
but I will not put my kids in a position where they're the outcast by default.
Mhm.
You can make yourself the outcast. You can have,
Yeah.
you can do, you know what I'm saying? But Goldie Gordon and Kat,
Mhm.
obviously, I don't think that it was your parents' intention. You know what I'm saying? Like
No, no, they
everyone has
were
the best
trying to
intentions,
teach
but
me
like we're
the best
forced to
education
be an
they could.
outcast from a young age.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the success and the grit and the hustle that you have in common. You're
Well,
extremely young industry CEO. So yeah, so go ahead.
probably, like, same for your mother, like, about your grandparents. I imagine she has, like, so much respect for them and saw them in a totally different light than, like, what everyone around her saw them in. Because like, that was my thing, like, I'm the first generation to graduate from college, but I'll be the first person also to, like, tell you that my dad is a lot smarter than I am. He just didn't have the opportunity with what he was doing in life to go to college and, like, get a degree. But everybody, like, growing up thought that he was just, like, dumb or, like, until they met him, like, didn't think anything of him or, like, "Oh, you're just a farm kid." And I'm like, "No, like, my dad's really smart." Like, he to this day, like I said, is incredibly smart, and I go to him for different advice on things all the time. And like that,
God, I would have loved to have been at PTA. God, I would have loved to have been at
oh my
PTA when
God,
your
that
parents
was
went
the
to the
one thing my
Catholic
parents did a
school.
really good job, and I'm so grateful for it. Being a little bit like not bad, but like misbehaved because I was the oldest and not around other little kids and didn't go to preschool. So like just general behavior was questionable. Like it's still kind of questionable, I
What do
guess.
you mean? We throw rocks.
No,
What do you mean, teacher?
yeah,
I
it's
throw
fine.
rocks.
Like my parents made a lot of time to go to parent teacher conferences. They took them so seriously, and I'm really grateful. And by the time, I think that was the other thing that even looking at me compared to my sisters, my one sister's 3 years younger, my baby sister's 6 years younger. By the time they were a little bit older, my dad had interacted with a really large land development company and had sold our family farm into an incredibly large farm. He had helped with like all the like conservation, the water, the city and urban planning for the like family farm into this like huge development that it is now. Like there's where he used to farm, there's a Walmart, there's a Cleveland Clinic, like there's thousands and thousands of homes. And like he helped plan this in phases and like do all kinds of like incredibly intelligent work. And he still has for like I think family legacy and because it matters a lot to him and because it matters to him, it obviously matters to me too. We still have like a family farm now that's like way out in rural Illinois. But
God, I
I
want to go
saw
there.
people
God, I
treat
want to
us
go
a
there.
lot differently too. Cause it went from being like, oh, like poor kids at a Catholic school and just farm parents to like, oh wow, like she is like her dad is really smart. And then like we ended up with money and like the way that people's behavior changed. And I saw it in like parents too. Like I was right at the right age to know that like some moms weren't nice to me. Like some moms would never volunteer to drive me from school to Girl Scouts right after school. And other moms were like, oh, get in the car. Come on. You like can ride with us. Like I watched that change of like whose parents acted differently, what girls acted differently, you name it. And then I went to public school once I was in high school. And then it was like just totally different. Like some of the clickiness wasn't there. Some of the clickiness was there. There were people that already knew about it before I like went to public school and stuff like that. So I think that, like, I guess growing up is a lot of it. It was like starting resourceful, like, was a good portion of it. But I think like me holding a lot of people at arm's length and not being the most trusting, but then once I do trust somebody, being like very protective, like these are my people, like you and I have that like friend relationship, you know, like I do anything for you and our like group text of people that we interact with. Like I think that like protective nature comes from like seeing like both sides of like, I want to say like humanity and like human interaction kind of young, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating because one of the things that when we met the first time that I was taken by is that some people, and I'm not talking about being opinionated, but there's a certain intellectual, deep read of people off the bat, and I assume sometimes it's wrong, but that
Yeah.
happens with
Yeah.
everybody. Like sometimes you can be pleasantly surprised or probably unpleasantly disappointed.
Right. Right.
But I think that when people, what I've learned, especially through this podcast, which I'm learning more about myself than I am our guest, to be honest, is that people who grow up with a certain grit or hustle or are required to have some sort of tension in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Very often, it's interesting because everyone that I've asked this, and I think you're hinting at the same thing. Your parents didn't intend to make you tougher. That was
No.
just
No.
that was just you had the farm, you grew up on the farm, and this was the school they were sending you to. But what's interesting is that it enabled you now
Mm-hmm.
to be a much stronger, tougher person. Which when we talk about the whole idea of this is keep hustling, is stay at it, is find your is get past your why to the how and actually push through. Those small things probably had a huge impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the idea of like keep hustling is very interesting, and you keep using the word grit, which is how I think about hustling. So early in my career when I like came into a sales org and insure tech, one of the things I was like helping my boss do because like I wanted like promoted and I wanted his job was like recruiting fellow like future me's. And he and I like had a really difficult time sometimes like figuring out like what makes a good salesperson, like what makes somebody gritty, because we would ask them like talk to me about something that was challenging in your life and like how did you overcome it. And the idea of like keep hustling was the gap between like perseverance and grit. Like grit is the willingness to go through that again. And like I didn't grow up thinking that my life was bad. Like I remember being sad that people were like bullying me or that I couldn't do things that like some normal kids did. But I didn't like I wasn't actually sad, you know, like I wasn't a depressed little kid. I was like playing in the mud all day. Like I generally speaking was probably pretty happy and like just considerably more feral than I am today, I guess. But like it wasn't sad, you know. And like I would go do it all over again and I wouldn't intentionally maybe put somebody else through it. But like to me, like grit is the keep hustling version of perseverance. Like perseverance is you went through it once and you would never want to go back through it. Like those are people that like come through really challenging things and they're like, I learned my lesson the first time. There's not developmental value to me to keep doing this. Grit is like firefighters and policemen and like people that like keep stepping into challenging environments. They keep hustling like over and over and over and over again. And that's what we had to assess in salespeople. Like salespeople get told time and time and time again to like kick rocks, go away. Like, I don't want to talk to you. How did you get my number? Stop calling me. And it takes a gritty person, not just somebody who has like initial perseverance. Those people are still like incredible and strong. Not somebody just like though with that perseverance. It takes like a truly like gritty person who's gonna keep hustling, gonna get back into it. The next call, the next meeting, the next day, the next week, month, year, you name it, you know? So
100%. And I think that I think if you would actually sit down a parent and you
mhm.
would say, do you want your child to have manageable challenges?
Mhm.
Manageable challenges. Not no child should go through real, those extreme
Right,
tragic things that really require more than hustle, that require
right, right.
superhuman strength. But aside from those things, I think that the average parent would say, the average educator, the average mentor would say, like, yeah, if it's always easy, then when the ability to look back and say, this is not the worst thing that's happened to me or the biggest challenge is something that you can't predict as
Right,
you're going through your career or
right.
being raised. That was weird that I said it that way. Like, I guess the
Brought
cattle
up,
analogy
being
is
brought
whatever.
up.
You know what I mean? But I think that there's something there to the fact that, like, if a parent should know that their kid is safe,
Mhm.
they would kind of want them to fall down off the bike. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I
So
mean,
that
I
then they have to get back up. Like, no parent wants
100%.
their kid to pick up the two-wheeler right off the bat. It's,
Right.
being able to get to you probably like, you're like, what's a two-wheeler? I
So
walked with
I was a
bales of hay
really
and
ornery
I
little
I I
child.
rode horses.
No, I mean, I eventually got a pony, which was really great. But I also had to scoop its poop and go out like in freezing cold weather in like northern Ohio and like chop up all of its ice before I went to school every morning so my pony had water. Like
I have this vision of like your parents rolling up to PTA like the Beverly Hillbillies, like in
they're
a
not no, they
tractor.
weren't that bad. My
I
dad
know, but
like
like I'm so bad. I'm so the guy from New York.
it wasn't
Like
that
it's
bad.
so bad.
It was
It's
still only
so
like
bad.
20 minutes outside of Cleveland. We
But like
weren't like
I see
some
you like
news
rolling
for
up to the first day of
civilization.
school. I
It
like
wasn't
see you
that
like rolling up to the first day of school with like hay in your mouth or something like, "What's
No,
up,
no,
y'all?"
it was not that bad. He like I remember like I literally still can like picture like the sports coat that he would wear and like cologne and his aftershave. Like I can like still like smell that. Like I imagine and like remember occasions he would get dressed up and he was always like really involved. Same thing like how we have like Big Eye and different state associations and stuff. He was like super well thought of and like appreciated in his space and he was on a lot of like boards and advisory stuff too. So like in his sphere of influence, like people like hold him in super high regard, you know? And it was the same thing with my mom. Like people my mom managed a bunch of different restaurants over the years and then moved into an assisted living facility before like nutrition had really taken off the way it is now. And like dietetics was like just diets like back in the 80s, you know, like it was just different. But she like moved into that and same thing, like anyone who worked with my mom was like, she's awesome and like wonderful. It was just people that I don't know, like took preconceived opinions and like over applied them, you know, like over painted
100%.
it.
And by the way, by the way, we don't have to dwell on this point, but I think that
Okay.
it's worth mentioning that as a kid, you probably didn't realize the extreme or kind of later in life, you said you realized like, oh, that these people were exclusionary, things like that.
Mhm.
It's incredible for me to think that your parents actually put themselves in that situation,
Yeah.
probably with more knowledge than you did,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
which
my
is
mom,
incredible.
100 she said that, like, at different times and stuff, especially now as, like, an adult talking to her about certain different things that, like, come up here and there, or, like, the one that's, like, really comical. My mom is so despite being, like, in a very fortunate position now, like, very, very modest about it. So, like, we'll go to the store and we could be at, like, a grocery store and we'll be, like, walking down the aisle, and I will see one of the, like, women that I knew was not kind to my mom back then and wasn't her daughter was not nice to me, and, like, I'm a passive aggressive so, like, I
Yeah.
whip out my engagement ring and I, like, comb my hair and I, like, make sure my pants fit nice and I, like, turn my feet so that the bottoms of my heels are showing, like, "Go ahead.
Yes.
Size me up now. Have at it." So, like, I'm annoying. My mom minds her own business, and this person could, like, tell her to eat in the grocery aisle, and my mom would, like, ask her where the buffet was. Like, my mom is still so, so nice and just like a different person. And she's always been like that. Like she's always been very nice. And I've always been a little bit more like my dad on the like feisty side of it. So like
No
that's
comment. I
not
will not step in that.
incredibly different.
You will not bait me into stepping into that today on my
What's
own
that?
show. I said you will not bait me into stepping into that on my own show.
Yeah,
No
no, no,
way.
not worth
No way. So I
it.
want to pivot to your professional career, which I know has been
Mhm,
incredible. But the question about
mhm,
hustle is, take us back to the most pivotal moment in your career so far and where you were, what it was like, and how that inspired your
mhm.
hustle to today.
So there's like little tiny things that I think add up to a greater sum that like all the little things are like, I don't know, 60% of it. But I think of this like one particular like 4-day window as like a very formidable like time and like kind of like singular event. And I'm like gonna like get sad. I was at the second insurtech that I was at, and I went to work for my boss, the guy that I had worked for before. I went to work for him a second time. The CEO, and he was like the head of sales there, actually head of revenue there. So he had me, he had RevOps, he had marketing, he had customer success under him at this new like startup, and we were doing pretty well. And we were supposed to be closing like our Series A shortly. So he comes back from lunch on Friday and is like, hey, do you want to go for a walk real quick outside? We're like downtown Columbus. And I was like, yeah. So we like go, we grab a coffee. We're like walking along the river in Columbus and just like talking about things. He's like, hey, like, have a good weekend, have a lot of fun. We're probably closing our Series A this weekend. As soon as we do that, it's like wheels up. It's like time to get it together. Like, keep hustling. We're going to have to recruit. Like, I'm going to need your best. Like, every single day for the next 6 months, like, you're going to have to be on. So, like, whether it's you go out and party, whether it's that you sleep all weekend, like, do whatever recharges you this weekend, because, like, come Monday, like, we're going. I'm like, hell yeah, like that's why I came here. Like, I'm so excited. Like, I've been recruiting, but like I can't wait to tell all these people that I know that like now's the time, like come work for me, come be on my team, come do all this stuff. And he's like, yeah. And then I came in on Monday morning and like our office was always quiet on Monday mornings because it was like young people. So like I'm an early riser, but like tons of people are like out to coffee networking. Tons of people were going to get there when they got there, like nobody was policing this startup in that regard. Like it wasn't when you punched in, it was like, were you doing your job really well? But it was like strangely quiet, even for there. And I was like, okay. And I like turned to my left and our conference room is right there. And every single member of the executive team is in there. I'm like, that's weird for a Monday morning. Like, guess we're getting our Series A. Like, I bet they're just finishing things up. We didn't. Our lead investor, like, something happened with the financing for them that they couldn't lead. And then the second did not want to lead the round because it comes with a ton of fiduciary responsibilities. So the whole Series A crumbled. By noon, my boss was fired. The head of product was fired. More than half of the product team was gone. The RevOps team was gone. The CEO was a founder and had been let go, and the CTO was becoming the
Holy
CEO.
moly.
And I liked that company in InsurTech. It was well intended and it was really interesting work still to me. But like I had very much come to work with that boss again. And like I still had a ton to learn, in my opinion, at that time. And I still probably did, from that boss. So like he comes back into the little room that like all the sales team people were in, like everyone that reported to him, we were all in this like kind of like room share space. And he like comes in and I know his demeanor after having worked with him for years and years. I'm like, what is wrong with him? And our desks are right next to each other. So I'm like tapping like under his monitor screen. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you like, what's going on? And he's like, come here. And I'm like, okay. And we like step out and we like go outside again, like less than like 4 days later, we're walking outside again. And he's like, we didn't get it. There's going to be a meeting in an hour that everybody's like coming to, and 75% of the company is like, let go. You're the head of revenue and you have a meeting with the board tomorrow. And I'm like, I was about to cry. I was like, which of my friends is impacted? Like, how does this hurt? Like, what happens to our customers? Like, I don't know this board. Like, I've seen the board in and out of the office a few times and then like, hi, I'm Kat. Like,
Yeah.
nothing formal ever. And these are like real VC investors. These are not just like a friendly neighborhood board. Like, these are the big dogs here. Like, this is an incredibly successful startup. And it was just like, it was really, really sad because it also was like this moment that I knew I was never going to work with this person that I had held in such high regard again. Like at that point when he's being let go, I'm being elevated into his position. He's going to go have to take like a job because obviously this was like short notice pretty quickly. I'm going to have to stay to like make sure that things go well for customers and the team that is still there. All the people underneath me had like gotten fired, so I had to like take care of my humans too, like you name it. It was like this really, really sad moment that like this person who had been so impactful and so formatting in who I was as a young person and professionally, that was just like instantly the end. Like it's one thing when you outgrow somebody, but like it was
Right.
just like yanked, and then all these new things were like put in front of me, like you have to be good at these things immediately. And some of them I was like already ready and prepared for, and some of them it was an immediate learning curve in just a totally different world.
Can you take us into the meeting the next day?
Yeah, the board flies in, some of them on private jets, some of them like drive
Wait, hold on.
in.
Wait, actually, time out. I want to go back. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
No,
want to
you're
take it back.
okay.
I want to know what happened when you got home that night.
I called every sales leader I knew in Columbus, and I had my team set up for interviews the next day, the day after, and that was Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I had them, each of my guys, each had 6 or 7 interviews depending on their experience, because I called every single person I knew who was a sales leader and said, if you're hiring, if you're even considering hiring in the next 2 months, these guys are exceptionally good at it. So I called in every favor I had to make sure that like my team had a spot as soon as they could, because they weren't expecting it obviously either. And like they're young guys that were like fresh out of college, like paying their rent, trying to save up money, paying their student loans. Like it was really, really hard on them. You know what I mean? Like they're living very much paycheck to paycheck. So that
I,
was the whole night.
Kat,
Yeah.
you know you're my people.
Yeah.
This episode, this podcast,
Yeah.
it brings out something incredible in people, and I'm not saying that just because it's my show.
That's fair.
But
It
I
is
just want to
super
reflect
show.
on this for a minute. And then we're going to get to that meeting. Your mentor and your boss just told you that that the entire house had come down.
Mm-hmm.
That you, as an individual, were going to have to sit with the board, and they were going to, whatever was going to happen was going to happen.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And yet, your singular focus was to set your people up. You could have
Yeah.
done that the next day. You could have said, "I'm
No.
going to prepare for this board meeting," and then
No.
you could have. No. 1
Yeah.
second. I promise the listeners in my pilot episode of this podcast that I was not going to shy away from the difficult conversations. You could have.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say please. You could have. You didn't, because that's not you.
Right.
But I'm saying in the course of looking at this movie, someone could have said, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to make a list of things. I'm going to prepare for this board meeting, and then, by the way, I'm not a terrible person, so I'm going to make sure that my people are taken care of." But yet, part of what pushed you forward, and now you're the CEO of a company, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
fast forward how many years later? When was this?
Like 6 years ago? More
6
now,
years later,
maybe?
you're the CEO of a company. And anybody who's listening to this right now, literally, if you want a boss and you want to find a boss that not only will you jump off the bridge for, but will hold your hand as you're jumping off, it's Kat. So I
Mhm.
love that you shared that, and thank you for that, because that's part of the hustle. And by the way, that's part of the grit. And if we want to go all the way back to this entire episode, we could say to the person who was left out earlier on in their life, never wanted someone to be left out.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, there's a certain, and I've told everybody this as I've like recruited them on my teams and stuff over the years. Like, I promise, like, whether the day comes, because it's been startups, you know, that like we have to part ways through no fault of our own. Like, you've worked your butt off, you've kept hustling every day, you've done right by everything you committed to doing, or because you're exceeding what your career here can give you. I'm in your court. And like my friend Caleb is a great example of that. He and I worked together at that first InsurTech. He recruited me when I made the choice to go to the InsurTech that we're kind of like talking about right now. He actually recruited me to go join the one he was at. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go do this other one. But then when I went to Agency Zoom, like first call, like as soon as I got my first manager hire, I knew he was ready for it. I knew my team that I had built would get along well with him, that the culture was going to line up with inserting
He's
a
a great guy.
manager.
We got to get him on the pod.
He's great.
We
He's
got to get him on the
wonderful.
pod.
But like when he got to a point with the like Agency Zoom acquisition into Vertifor that he had to keep developing his sales skills and his leadership skills and stuff, and Vertifor needed to get Agency Zoom settled, it made more sense. And like I was beyond happy for Cabe that he found Ascend and that he was incredibly successful and like got to do a lot of really impactful work with Ascend. And then now Cabe's back working for me again, and I'm more than happy to have him back. Andrea can find somebody else. But I'm like more than happy to have my friend back. And if the time comes again that like there's somewhere else that better suits his needs, like wholeheartedly, like he is a human being that has like a world to serve and impact and other people that matter to him too. And I'm not going to be, as a human, like friend, mentor, boss, you name it, like the impediment that keeps somebody from doing what they're meant to do, you know?
I love that.
So,
Okay, now let's go back. Okay, back
yeah.
away from the mushy stuff. All right, so now you are walking into the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
you were probably amped up, man. You're probably
No. Oh my God.
amped
No, I
up.
shake. You and I have talked about this before. I'm not actually an extrovert. Like, if you and I were having this conversation in front of people, I would have already thrown up
I know, one second, but you didn't like amp up on caffeine. You didn't like hit the caffeine.
No. Oh my God,
Like
no. Because otherwise I would have just I would have just
Spano.
shook
What
and
was her name from Saved by the
like,
Bell? I'm
what?
so excited. What was that, Saved by
No,
the
no,
Bell?
people ask me for like walk up music sometimes at conferences when I'm speaking. I'm like, can we just use dead silence? Like, how about just silence?
In fact, when I get up there, I'm gonna be silent for like until someone
It
realizes.
like takes me a minute. Even when I get up there, I like have to like take some deep breaths to like feel comfortable in front of a room of people. I will always take small groups over large groups. Like I'm such
So you
an
sat down.
and shook and sat there silently, just shaking in my little tiny chair, my very big chair, in my little tiny self. And one of the board members actually like kind of called on me. He was like, "Hey, you're new in this position. Like, are you staying?" Like, I had hardly had a chance to talk to the CTO that's now CEO in the last 24 hours. And he's like, "Are you staying?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, until
Do I have a job?
yeah, like until the wind changes, like, yes, like I want to see this be successful. I still believe in the company's mission. So, like, yes. And he's like, great. Like, he's like, you're the best salesperson I've ever come across. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you're going to have to be the best sales leader I've ever come across now. And I'm like, all right,
Okay.
we can do our best to do that. So we had that meeting. I knew all my numbers and stuff like that because my boss, like the guy that had been my boss, like he and I were working on that. He was very much more like a hype, exciting salesperson, and I've always been more the nerd person in our relationship anyway. So I knew everything we needed to know for that meeting, or like could grab it very quickly. So like that was okay. So like meeting goes well. He mentioned a couple people's names during that meeting around like, hey, I'm not here in Columbus to keep an eye on the business, but I want to get somebody here that like is an advisor and keeps an eye on this business. So I immediately took it upon myself to go introduce myself to every single person he had named. And I got over the like course of like the next like 3 weeks to a month, I got lunch with every single one of them in their office. I was like,
Yes.
hey, so and so thinks super highly of you. I know you guys have worked together in the past when you guys were both at this company and he was the founder and you were this, or so on and so forth. I was like, can I steal an hour of your time? So he comes back, we get assigned our person, which is weird because that person now has worked with a ton of people who are still like professionally involved in my life. So we get assigned our person. He was like one of the people that I probably had like the least just like natural like connectivity and affinity for. Like we just didn't hit it off. But I've stayed friends with all the other ones too. And it's been really, really fun. And that guy and I ended up building a good relationship. He's just very like matter of fact and a little more straight laced and like not normal,
And
probably.
it all goes
Like
back to being on
normal.
the forum throwing rocks. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Like he's just a nice, normal person. So yeah, like I just did that. And now actually when I chose when I was trying to decide back and forth about like everything going on with Agency Zoom and like how excited was I would just stay with Vertifor because that's like a huge opportunity, but also responsibility at the same time. I contacted that board member, and this guy's like flying on a plane, moment's notice billionaire kind of guy. And I was like, hey, like, Pete, do you mind? I'm kind of stuck on what I should do next with my career. And he's like, you should go through with the acquisition. You should do this. You should do that. It's so, so, so helpful. Do it. You should. Like you'll be fine. Like I know you're kind of scared about a big org and getting lost in the fray, but like you're gonna be fine. You'll be amazing. So
And you
even
were,
to
by the
this
way.
day, keep not like close friendship with him, but like if I need something, can call him. And yeah, so it turned out okay, but I was definitely sweating and shaking once I was in the meeting. So
Kat, you rock. You rock. Bottom line is you rock.
thank you.
You're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to our entire industry and to anybody. Everyone should follow you, follow your journey, see what's going on. I know there's big things that are going to happen at Indium because of you, and because of just the way that you handle yourself and your people and take care of your people. And I can imagine that the people you surround yourself with understand that, myself included, and realize that everyone rises together.
I
And if you get through the tough times, then you could get through the easier times.
mm-hmm.
So, and thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. Like I said, it's been one, it just feels like us normally like BSing.
Exactly.
It feels like
With
normal
just
tirades
less
that we go
aggression. Just
on.
less aggression.
So, yeah.
We close the podcast by asking our guests to leave us with their favorite timely or lifetime inspirational quote. So the floor is yours.
Am I allowed to have two? Can I have two?
Only because it's you.
Thanks.
Only because I don't say no
Can
to
you
you.
edit out the second one? I'm going to get really sad.
No. We're going to keep them both in.
My 8th grade, I had just switched to public school, like at the end of middle school. My 8th grade health teacher had this like silly little phrase that she gave us. And I remember like at the time thinking like, this is so cool. Cause I was a middle schooler. I was like, she's so cool. And she was friends with my godmother as well. Like I didn't know when I first started, but like my godmother came over for my birthday and she's like, are you taking Mrs. Holland's class? I'm like, I am. She's like, that's my best friend. I'm like, cool. So it feels like a little bit like kismet or like the stars aligned that like this silly quote like stuck and mattered then from a person that like just kind of same thing like stuck and mattered. She told us those who mind don't matter, those who matter don't mind. And I think that's like what has allowed me to like be my like introverted and sometimes extroverted self. It's what's like allowed me to like have my own like eclectic strange personality compared to what's normal in insurance, you know? And just like try to always represent like what I would want to be, like, you know, what would want to be mattered to me. And then the other one was like coming to Indium. I have a mentor that I like go back to very consistently. I've known since I was in high school, super generous with his time. He's invested and founded a bunch of different companies. So I was really stuck on whether I should take the CEO role at Indium. And I was talking to him about it because I had other opportunities where I felt more prepared. And he told me, he's like, you're never going to feel prepared for anything worth doing. It's always going to be like going out on a limb. And the like part that like really stuck with me that I've told other people and kind of like passed on to like the little soundbite is if you're going to want to do it again in 5 years, like if 5 years from now you believe you want that opportunity, that's the one you should go do now. So if 5 years from now you want to be CRO or VP of revenue of whatever company again, or this or that, sure, go do that. But if in 5 years you want to be CEO of Indium, you should go be CEO of Indium now. Do it now. He's like, but like it's the concept of like believing in your future self and like where you think you'll grow and where you'll be and like front loading that bet. So yeah, that like little like 5-year mindset of like, if you believe you would want something 5 years from now, go do the work to get it now. And I just like love that. And there's been, in coming to Indium, it was the thing that like made up my mind, like finalized the decision. And then in decisions I've had to make around Indium, it's been the same thing. Like if I'm going to want this done this way in 5 years, there's no better time than now to like be doing it, setting it up, getting the like building blocks together so that it can be what it should be in 5 years, you know? So those are my two.
Kat,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
you for
you.
being here. This has been Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.